Welcome into the roundtable. I'm Brad Wakai. That's Tyson Gentry. We're continuing along with our college football conference breakdowns. This is our fifth and final one here as we are breaking down the SEC conference today. I know you're super excited. We got to do my Big Ten last episode, so if you haven't watched that, check that out. Now we're moving into big boy football in the SEC conference, and Tyson's super pumped for this one.
I am super pumped, but don't let Brad fool you. I think he's more excited than I am. He's a Big Ten guy, but I think Brad has more money on the SEC week over week than I might.
I don't know. There may be 1 week out of probably the last 10 seasons that I've missed the SEC game of the week on Saturday.
You love Gary. As long as Gary's on TV, you're watching.
And for those out there who don't know, so Tyson doesn't like Gary. I think he's great, and so we always have battles. He's like, "Did you hear that stupid shit Gary just said?" I'm like, "I thought it was great. I love it."
Over under before we get into the show. How many times does he bring up Tua this year? Setting the line at 50.5.
You think, or is he going to bring up Mac Jones a lot more this year? Because I feel like he only goes so far back into his references.
I don't know. I mean, Tua is that guy. Like, he's going to have to pay Gary Danielson for the endorsement that he's done for him over the last couple of years.
Oh yeah, he loves him some Tua, that's for sure. But
and this conference, as we get into it, Brad, I mean, we're joking around a little bit, but this is like, this is NIL haven. This is transfer portal heaven. This is everything that people say is wrong with college football. Welcome to the SEC.
Yeah, and you got the self-proclaimed transfer portal king in Lane Kiffin coaching up one of these schools.
Yeah, he's the king of a couple other things too, but not winning football games yet.
It's close. Last year it looked like it'd be a good step in that direction. But we'll get all into it. So how we're going to break it down? We have our tiers like we've done. We're going to start out in each division, East and West here in the SEC. We have our different tiers for this one. Tongue-in-cheekly, we did the freshman tier for the bottom ones, the JV tier for those who kind of compete, and obviously the varsity tier for the top guys in the division and in the conference itself. And then at the end, we're going to go into our money-making time, give out win totals, our bets on each win total, whatever we like, as well as our conference winner for the SEC. So let's dive right into it, Tyson. Let's start with the Eastern Division. Really been run by Georgia?
I need your opinion first on this. Where would, say, the Pac-12, where would they fit into this freshman JV varsity tier in the SEC?
Oh, man.
Conference as a whole.
Be in JV.
Would anybody make it to the varsity level? Maybe
Oregon if Cristobal was still there. But with now that he's gone, there's so many questions. But yeah, this is an exclusive tier, man. If you're varsity SEC, you're exclusive.
Something like that.
All right, let's dive into it. Freshman tier right now, and here are the teams that we have in our freshman tier, starting with Missouri. And this was a team that used to be good a few years ago. They had the Big 12 years and they were good. And when they switched to the SEC, they had a few good years. Just hasn't quite come through for them. Right now being led by Eli Drinkwitz, who was at Appalachian State. He's going into his third season here now. 11-12, hasn't necessarily found anything special here at Missouri. I actually like Eli Drinkwitz. I think he's a good coach, but it's a tough division, tough conference to coach in. Last year went 6-7, 3-5 in conference. Only returning 6 offensive starters, 8 on defense, which should be interesting. But Tyson, what are you thinking about Missouri this year?
Well, they are returning 8 starters on defense, but it's a unit that gave up 230 yards rushing per game. I think Tennessee ran for like 450 on him, and Kentucky put like 340 up on the ground. So yeah, they lost both those games. And then they lose Steve Wilkes, who was like actually a big get at the time. People were excited. That didn't work out very good. He's back in the pros. I think he's doing quality control or whatever. We'll learn a lot about Brady Cook, but, I mean, on offense, they're replacing maybe the best do-it-all player in the conference, Tyler Beatty, and that's going to be really tough for Missouri to overcome.
Yeah, they're 100th in returning output for a team that wasn't very good last year. 30.4% of their yards returning. Their quarterback last year, Basilak, he transferred away. So that's 114th in returning yards there. 59.6% of their tackles are returning, but 83 O-line starts. A good foundation there. But like you said, Tyson, you don't have a game breaker at really any of these skill positions for them. There may be a couple receivers that could shine, but I think it's going to be a tough year for Missouri overall.
It feels like they never left the Big 12.
Can't tackle and score a lot of points. Vandy, next team in this freshman tier. Now, as we're recording this, they just smacked Hawaii. And that's something that I kind of expected here. And a lot of it has to do with this 7 returning offensive starters, 7 returning defensive starters. Like they have people who are returning 38th in actual output that is coming back into the program in 2022. 81.2% of those yards are returning at 16th in the nation. So they have a foundation here under Clark Lamb. Mike Wright, he played against Seals. It seems like they're going to do some split positional stuff there at quarterback. But, last year went 2-10, 0-8 in conference. Like, this is a Vandy team that gets beat up by the SEC all the time. I don't expect that to change, although I actually think they're going to be an improved football team this year just due to all those yards and output that are back in the program.
Well, they're halfway to their win total from a year ago. At the time of this recording, 1-0. That's the best record a Vanderbilt team's had in a long time. You and I have like the same national championship odds that Vanderbilt does right now. I mean, it's just one of those programs, man. There's just not a whole lot going on in a positive direction. Yes, they go out and they beat Hawaii. Now they have to go to Northern Illinois at some point this season. They get visited by Wake Forest, and then they draw Alabama and Ole Miss from the West. It's brutal. And yes, beating Hawaii is a positive step, but the reason they're in the freshman tier will become pretty clear by some point in October.
Yeah, and this is a Vanderbilt team that lost to an FCS school last year too. Like it's just one of those teams who can't get out of their own way. Not a lot of talent there, and I think that it's going to change with Clark Lea there. Coming from Notre Dame, who's their defensive coordinator, they have a plan. Like there's like somebody who oversees the football program in there now that was hired by the athletic director. So they want to move in the right direction to start building this football program back. But that takes a while, especially in a conference as difficult as the SEC. And I think, Tyson, they haven't won an SEC game in 21 straight games.
Last year, 21-20 against South Carolina, I think was the only conference game they had that was within one possession. They got outscored by 21 points a game. And so to be an improved football team, really, lose a couple games by 7 points and lose your overall games by 14, and we're way better.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's our freshman tier. Let's move into our JV tier out here in the Eastern Conference. I'm very interested in this team, Tyson. I'm kind of excited. My boy Billy Napier is coaching for the Florida Gators. Last year, 6-7, decided to move on from Dan Mullen. I think that surprised a lot of people, but it just didn't seem like the relationship was good there. So they bring in Billy Napier, who is awesome at Louisiana. I think he fits this program perfectly. And we also get to see a lot of hype around Anthony Richardson, their quarterback. This is going to be the first year he's taken over as starter. Huge expectations around him. Somebody who's super fast with a huge arm. I'm excited for this Florida team because Billy wants to run the ball. I think that's what they're going to try to do. The question is really, what do they have there that's talented in this program?
Well, they did, they brought in Montrell Johnson, who followed Billy Napier here from Louisiana, but losing Damian Pierce was huge. But the Florida discussion kind of begins and ends with what you think of Anthony Richardson. Like, do you think he's the guy that played Georgia and he will never get better than that? Because that guy sucked.
Yep.
But realistically, right, he's going to get better. And he showed, you could probably count 5 times last year that was just like, holy shit, this guy's special. But it wasn't like backing up Emory Jones. You had the highest bar to clear to show us, you can do something impressive. I just think like losing Diabate and Elam is pretty big on the defensive side of the ball. But again, this is the conference of transfers, and they kind of stocked the cupboard with a lot of guys from other SEC schools. So I'm interested. Year one for Dan Mullen, I think he went 10-3. I really don't think that happens this year in Florida, but I think they'll be better than 6-7 or whatever it was.
Yeah, 2-6 in conference too. That's not good. They lost 3 in a row, and that's really what put Dan Mullen on the hot seat. Plus 6,000 as a conference future in the SEC. And what's interesting here, if they can beat Georgia, it's always a neutral game. So no home field advantage either way. It's awesome. I want to go down there and party so bad at that tailgate, the biggest outdoor tailgate or whatever they call it. It just looks so fun. Plus 6,000. If they can beat Georgia and they win the SEC, that is a great price for a 1-game shot at winning this conference at plus 6,000. But
Well,
like you said, it's up to Richardson.
you might be a bit out ahead of yourself here, thinking that they only have to win against Georgia. Because one thing we know about Florida over the last couple of years is they're going to be in dogfights with bad teams. That just seems to be the way that this thing has progressed since the Urban Meyer days. Even in their really good seasons, they played LSU with Joe Burrow closer than anybody else in the conference, and then they'll show up and you'll turn on the TV and they're tied with Vanderbilt at half.
31.9% of their yards are returning, so not a ton there. Like you said, you bring in transfers. Billy Napier is going to get some of his guys in here eventually. 98 O-line starts. I think that's a good spot to protect Richardson. He's a dual threat guy. See if he can use his legs. But like you said, we don't really know much about him besides he's like a tantalizing talent.
He's better than Emory Jones.
We know that. Emory Jones. We know that. Yes. Can he stay healthy? That's a big question mark as well. Because if he goes down, we're talking about a Florida team. Like, there's not a lot there.
That's the whole conference, right? I mean, we always joke about, and we'll get into Kentucky here next, but you have to have a quarterback to win in the SEC, right? That's the thing. But you have to have a quarterback good enough to win in the SEC. It's not the same thing as having a quarterback to win the ACC or the Big 12, something like that. A.J. McCarron, those days are gone, right? But there are Stetson Bennett won a national championship. It's a different thing to be a SEC quarterback and then be like a really good college quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. And for those that understand, it's like a lot of this is based on like physical football, establishing the line of scrimmage. Can you run play actions? Can you run the team? And then like we talk about the ACC, like those quarterbacks are like awesome. Like they're making crazy throws, and you don't necessarily see that a lot of time in the SEC. Although recently it's changed a little bit, to your point.
And there's a guy right here I think we're about to get into next up on the list.
Yeah, Kentucky. And like you said, man, Will Levis coming off a good season. It was relatively unknown. 2,826 yards, 66% completions, 24 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, a little high, but 9 touchdowns on the ground. That's good. Mark Stoops, 10th season there. He's been great in the past, last half of his tenure.
I'd say
two since then.
2 seasons over 10 wins in 4 years for Kentucky is a freaking home run, man. Like that's really impressive.
I want to see more Will Levis this year because there's NFL buzz around him. With reason, right? He's a big kid, has a rocket arm, and if he can duplicate what he did, I think there may be a shot for him in the NFL. It's just how high he's going to go, how good he looks, and things like that. But besides that, though, you lose Wan'Dale Robinson, which was their do-it-all guy last year. I think that is tough for Kentucky, but good news is Chris Rodriguez comes back, second-team preseason All-American. By numbers, he was the best running back in the conference last year. We'll have to see how that output is this year. 45 offensive line starts. I think that's going to make it tough for both Levis and Rodriguez and this offense. But there's a lot of positive momentum around Kentucky going in this year.
And one thing to note on Rodriguez, I think it stinks, but he had a DUI arrest this offseason and apparently is fighting to get back in the good graces of the coaching staff from everything that we've heard. So, like, that's 1,300 all-purpose yards or 1,400 yards on the ground that, might be missing depending on how they, want to discipline this thing. But they lose Wan'Dale Robinson, which is huge, but they also lose Josh Ali. And I think those two guys, like Will Levis last year, Wan'Dale Robinson got the ball. I think he got targeted 2-1 to the second most targeted guy on the team. So Will Levis was awesome, but he had an NFL wide receiver to throw the football to, and this year he doesn't. And I've been the one championing this guy for the better part of the last 6 months as we went through draft season. Like, Will Levis is better than that guy and that guy and that guy. But now we actually get to find out because this team coming off of 10 wins, big year in Kentucky. They were hanging out, among the top 15 for a while or right around that mark. And Will Levis, if he's the guy that everyone thinks he is, should be able to keep this team in the top 20. But roster-wise, talent-wise on that offense, it's kind of slim pickings at the skill positions.
Yeah, at 71.3% of their yards returning, so that is a good sign. Obviously, when you have your quarterback and starting running back from last year return, that's going to boost those numbers. But here's what interests me. 6 returning offensive starters, 5 returning defensive starters. Seems like they have experience, 77th in returning output, but how does that look, like you said, when you kind of lose some of that top-end talent? you have on that roster. I think it's a very interesting year for Kentucky. Their win total is at 7.5, which we'll get into later. But just throwing it out there are high expectations for a Kentucky football team, which I don't think many people expect going into a college football year.
I know. And another thing to note about Kentucky is, once again, they're going to have a really good trio of linebackers. That's been a staple of Kentucky for the last 4 or 5 seasons. It seems like they just have freaks running around making tackles, and they did it again.
South Carolina, I mean, here's another interesting team. I mean, they're led by Shane Beamer, son of legendary coach Beamer. I'm forgetting his first name. I'm completely blanking, but at Virginia Tech.
I'm not even going to tell you.
Oh my God, it's going to come to me as soon as
I
I'm
know.
getting through another sentence. But they bring in Spencer Rattler at quarterback, transferred from Oklahoma. He was the preseason favorite for the Heisman Trophy last year. Things didn't end well at Oklahoma. I think Spencer Rattler isn't good. I think the whole hype about him being the number 1 pick a few years ago was insane. But he is a major upgrade at quarterback from what South Carolina had last year. Talent-wise, just in general, even if he's not the high end of what everybody thought he was, even what he would be in the middle when he was struggling at Oklahoma, that's an upgrade for South Carolina than what they've had. 9 returning offensive starters, and they bring in potential star quarterback. That's interesting to me. 43rd in returning output, 51.5% of their yards are returning, 129 O-line starts are back. That's huge for me, especially if they want to play this physical style of football under Beamer. What do you think about South Carolina heading into this year?
I'm confused a little bit about what to expect from South Carolina because you mentioned it, right? I mean, they had a graduate transfer at quarterback for parts of last season. And so it's going to come down to what Spencer Rattler is. I think if he's, 70% of the guy that people thought that he was, which may be optimistic as well, based on what we saw a year ago, maybe 70% isn't who he is. But if he's that guy, this team could make a little bit of noise. Talented, right? I mean, that's one thing South Carolina always seems to be, just like every other one of these teams, no matter how much we dunk on them. Go look at the defensive line rooms in all of these schools and who's playing in the NFL, the pedigree, the coaches, all that stuff. I agree with you. I think Spencer Rattler sucks. That's just kind of where I'm at. And so I don't anticipate South Carolina being much of a threat, but I think Spencer Rattler's talented enough with this team to maybe be able to scare some people as they go through this season.
Just need to apologize to the Beamer family for not remembering the name Frank Beamer. That is completely on me.
I knew if I brought up his name, we were going to get like a 5-minute rant about why he is the ultimate football guy.
Well, the special teams Beamer ball. Oh, baby, let's go. We'll see what Shane can do. I mean, this is his second season now. Historically speaking, coaches in their second season, you really kind of know what they're made of. They did win 7 games last year, going 7-6. Can they take that leap into potentially an 8-win season? But I think if you don't qualify for a bowl with this team, that's a huge disappointment. I think staying at 7-6, I don't think that's that bad of a season for South Carolina. And obviously you want to see that leap, but we'll see how good Spencer Rattler is. I mean, it just comes down to that. You supposedly upgraded at quarterback. We'll see if he's actually the answer there.
And the defense isn't going to be as good as it was a year ago because they improved by 12 points a game from 2020 to 2021. So some regression there probably. But if Rattler is average, then that cancels out. And if he's above average, then maybe we're talking about a good team.
Okay. Tennessee. I want Tennessee to be back so bad. I love the tradition. I love the colors. I love the checkered end zone. It just hasn't worked out for them. 7-6 last year, 4-4 in conference. Josh Heupel, I think he did a good job there. And the coach before him, that idiot. Oh man,
he was Fulmer?
Not Josh Heupel. Jeez, I'm blanking all these names today. I got too much stuff in my head, but I think he'd get a good job taking over for the mess that was left before him. Jeremy Pruitt.
Yeah.
God, he was bad. So Heupel, coming over from UCF, I think he's done a good job to kind of stabilize things here.
100%. And we're talking about a team here, Brad, with who I think might be the best value pick for the Heisman Trophy going into this season with Hendon Hooker. I think that he's going to improve off of his breakout in 2021, which kind of sounds crazy to say because he completed like 70% of his passes, 3,000 yards almost, 31 tuds, 3 interceptions,
Crazy.
3 picks, and he ran for over 600 yards. And Tennessee only won 7 games.
Yeah.
But as you said, 8 starters back on offense. Cedric Tillman's back. Jabari Small's back on after averaging like 5.5 yards a carry. Tennessee's got some dudes on offense. Uh, Tennessee couldn't stop anybody a year ago. We'll see how that changes because the SEC is changing a little bit. You have to be able to score 30 and stop other guys from scoring 30. We get our minds broken because every 4 years there's a Georgia defense or there's another all-time Alabama defense that shuts all these guys down. These guys score on each other nonstop. It's just there's always one or two that can stop everybody. And Tennessee has to kind of enter that the ability to stop the pass is going to be huge because they're going to score points.
13th in the country in returning output, 80% of their yards back, 91 offensive line starts are here right now. They'll be starting on the line. 74.3% of their tackles are back. That's 20th in the country. So to your point, they need to start stopping people on defense. How do you do that? 7 returning defensive starters and a good chunk, and a great chunk of your tackle output last year is back playing again. So I think this will be where we see what Josh Heupel's been doing to address the weaknesses in Tennessee. I think we think about him, great offense, high flying. And I think that's what we saw last year at Tennessee. That's why they won 7 games. That's why they went 4-4 in conference. But a lot of those losses were due to their poor defense. So we'll see if that was addressed. It seems like this is a good start, and this would be the year to do it with all those players returning.
They allowed, I think it was 29 points a game a year ago, 275 yards allowed through the air to opposing offenses, which in the SEC East isn't ringing any bells, right? That's not a very good number. So if that number goes down and Tennessee's offense stays the same, if Hooker takes that next step, like I'm projecting, this could be the number 2 team in the East by a pretty, comfortable amount.
Let's get to the varsity tier, and there's only one team in this varsity tier in the East, and that is the Georgia Bulldogs, the defending national champions, a defense that was all time. They were just awesome last year. Stetson Bennett's back, coming off a 2,800-yard season, 64.5% completions, 29 touchdowns, 7 picks. Every single week it seemed like JT Daniels, and all Stetson Bennett did was hold off a much more talented player in JT Daniels and win them a national championship game, even when people are talking about replacing him before a championship game. Like, they didn't just pound Michigan. Like, it was crazy. 3 returning defensive starters has me worried. The thing that doesn't, I guess, push me over the edge on that is because there's just so much talent in this program. They recruit so well at a high level that you have 5-star guys waiting in line like they do at Alabama, just waiting for their time to play. So, yeah, they lost a lot of last year's teams. They lost a lot of people to the NFL draft. There's going to be great players coming in who are going to start the season that we're going to know their names very soon. Georgia, man, do you think they can repeat? Like, how good do you think this team's going to be?
Well, it's tough when teams have seasons that are as special as Georgia's was last year, where 2 defensive linemen go in the top 15. Like you said, only 3 defensive starters back, 1 in the front 7 there. But one thing that's important to keep in mind with kind of just the Ohio States of the world, Georgia, Alabama, these guys, is they rotate in so much talent that they might not have been starters, but they play at USC or they play at Oregon and they'd be the best player on defense, right? Jalen Carter, I think, is going to be like their next star on defense. Robert Beal could slide into a not quite a Trayvon Walker role because I think it became fun to make fun of his production after he went number 1, but that dude was still a monster. So anticipating somebody to get to that level will be interesting, but it's, to me, and I know this sounds weird, it's on Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh to run the football. Georgia's identity is running the football. It's on that offensive line and those big guys. They lose Zamir White, who was awesome for them. They lose James Cook, who would come in and hit home runs. They've kind of quietly been running back university for the last decade over here in Georgia, and they need somebody else to step up because, look, Stetson Bennett is good enough to win you a national championship, but he's not good enough to be the reason you win a national championship. And I don't think Georgia's defense is going to be I mean, I don't want this to sound disrespectful, but if they're in the same galaxy as the defense last year was, they might win again. Like that's how good the defense they had a year ago was.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic points there. I mean, yes, I think about the running backs that Georgia's had just recently. I mean, you had three that 1 year: Chubb, Swift,
Sony.
and Sony Michelle. You know, all in the NFL. Sony Michelle's starting to flame out a bit. It looks like, and then you come back two more, boom, right into the
Todd Gurley
NFL.
started it, right? And then we've just been
Yeah,
going boom, 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 boom. Isaiah Crowell, even we can go all the way back. They
yeah,
have
you go all the
monsters.
way back. Brock Bowers, tight end, awesome. I mean, he might be a first round pick. He's awesome.
He's the best tight end, I think, in the SEC since Kyle Pitts. And guess who backs him up? Is the number one rated tight end recruit in the history of high school football, Eric, what's his name? Eric Gilbert. He committed to LSU, transferred to Florida, then ended up transferring to Georgia. So maybe he's just going to be jumping around all over the place and not find a home. But that's the strength of this team right now, is the fact they have the best tight end group, like in modern college football, at least on paper. And so if they want to get back to the identity of punching you in the face, they're going to. Because I think Brock Bowers, is already, him and Michael Mayer are the two best tight ends in college football right now, and they both like to block. So if Georgia wants to get back to beating your ass, there's not a whole lot you can do about it.
Yeah. The other thing that Georgia has going for him, 58th toughest schedule in the country this year. That's for a defending national champion. They get a big time scheduling break there. So as these new guys on defense are rotating in, it's not like they're going gauntlet, where they may be eliminated from contention. They can ease into this thing. We know Kirby Smart is very good at molding a defense. So that is definitely a huge thing for him. By the end of this thing, if Stetson Bennett continues to grow and like expand his talents, I mean, we could be talking, like you said, it's going to be SEC title game against Bama, and then winner goes, or maybe they both go, and it's anybody's game as once you get into that 4-team playoff.
Let's see how good those recruiting classes Kirby had that beat Saban really were. Now it's time to find out.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get to the West and the team in the division that Alabama's dominated, as we're talking about. Now we'll get to them here because we got to go through the little freshmen. We got to understand who's here in our freshman tier. Now, this may be disrespectful to a lot of you old heads out there, to a lot of college football fans out there, but you're going to have to listen to our assessment on this thing. We're talking now. We're not talking when Bo Jackson was playing. We're not talking Cam Newton. We're talking Auburn football right now.
We're not even talking freshman Bo Nix.
We're exactly like this team. Are people forgetting that there was a freaking mutiny almost? Like they tried to have the coach fired. Like this.
I'm not going to lie. I actually forgot about
that.
I forgot about that. Oh, that's so funny. Brian Harsin, like, you're number two, right? Tank Bigsby, all-time kind of guy there at Auburn running the football. TJ Finley stinks. Zach Calzada kind of looks like he stinks. Kobe Hudson goes to UCF. Auburn was – everyone else in the conference was gaining transfers. Auburn had an Oklahoma-like exodus from their football team, and the only thing that happened was they kept the coach.
Yeah, that's it. They're like, well, everybody hates this guy, so what we're going to do, we're going to keep the coach, and everybody else can figure it out.
It's bad, but, I mean, let's just break it down from a football perspective. Like, Kobe Wooden and Derek Hall are good on the defensive line. Owen Popo is back. He missed 8 games a year ago. He's a good player. Mm-hmm. The secondary has to replace Smoke Monday, Roger McQueer. Like, Penn State's coming week 3. Auburn is going to get beat down.
You think so?
Yes. Auburn's bad.
Win totals at 6. We'll get into that later. So that's a little idea on how Vegas thinks they'll be this year. 6 and 7 last year with all that turmoil going on, plus 15,000 to win the conference, which is crazy. I actually like Brian Harsin. I liked him at Boise State. I think he's a good coach. I think he can coach. There's a difference between coaching at Boise State and Boise, Idaho, and coaching Auburn University in freaking Alabama, in the heart of college football. It's a difference. Like there's a different level of coaching Mountain West and the SEC, how you treat people, how you recruit. Like it's a whole different ball game. He might be in over his head here. He might be. And that doesn't mean I don't think he's a good coach. I just think he may not be the guy for Auburn. We'll see. I think this year is going to have a lot to do with that, but they have the first toughest schedule in the country based on who they play, on the road home splits. That is not good for a team with huge question marks surrounding their program, coming off of an attempted coup in the offseason. And then you have to take that into the toughest schedule in the country. This could be a
One thing,
disaster for Auburn.
they have 5 straight home games to open the season. So maybe they get some juice from those guys and they beat Missouri. But it's Missouri, LSU, Penn State, right? Like that's not exactly the easiest way to kind of get things rolling. And then week 6, we go to Georgia. And if they're 2-4 after those 6 games, like they could be 5-0 and we could just be stupid and they just actually have these athletes because they're Auburn. But I think there's a realistic chance that they're sitting at 2-4 after week 6. And then the administration has to take a long, hard look in the mirror. Like, how did we screw this thing up so bad?
Right. We hated Gus Malzahn that much. Like, at least he won 8-9 games.
Hey, shout out Scott Frost, dude. Some guys just going to keep their jobs forever.
True. When you're the golden child. All right, JV tier. Let's move into this one. Congratulations to this school who got out of the freshman tier just solely because of Sam Pittman, and that's Arkansas. Went 9-4 last year, 4-4 in conference. Had been really good since Pittman's come in. I mean, how many SEC games they lose in a row before they hired Pittman? I mean, it was bad at Arkansas for a while. They were a dumpster fire. KJ Jefferson's back, 2,676 yards, 21 touchdowns, 4 picks. Was also their leading rusher last year with 664 yards. That has to improve from a running back output perspective. But KJ Jefferson's good for them and what they want to run. They want to be physical. They want to push people around. And he fits that mold.
How many passing yards did he have?
2,676.
Treylon Burks had 1,100 receptions, and he had 11 touchdowns out of those 21 touchdowns. Right? They're bringing in, I think it's Hazelwood, right, is who they're bringing in from Oklahoma. Unlikely he can replace Treylon Burks because Treylon Burks was maybe the best athlete on the field just about every game that he stepped into last season. But again, here we go with the kind of stealing from your neighbor, right? Landon Jackson, defensive lineman from LSU, joins Arkansas. Drew Sanders, linebacker from Alabama, joins Arkansas. Latavius Brinney from Georgia joins Arkansas. Bumper Pool's back, which objectively is the coolest name in college football. He had 125 tackles a year ago. The dude's a stud. So the defense, I think, is going to be good, but it's just replacing Treylon and his output at the wide receiver position, and then you need more from Raheem Sanders and Dominique Johnson. Both guys average over 5 yards a carry, but you have to give them the chance because somebody has to step into those 1,100 yards and those 11 touchdowns, and you're going to have to do it with more than one guy.
83rd in returning output, 7 returning starters on offense, 68.7% of their yards are returning. A lot of that is, like I mentioned, KJ Jefferson being the quarterback and also the leading rusher. This is where Sam Pittman's done a fantastic job. 101 offensive line starts are back. He wants big, physical, athletic offensive lines. I think he's done that since he's since he's taken the reins here in his 3rd season. Now it looks like he's got things churning there. So that may help things out, right? It's a good offensive line. You can create space. You can have better running attempts from your running backs, and hopefully that works out. My question is, as you said, it's mainly surrounding KJ Jefferson now that he doesn't have an NFL first-round talent at wide receiver who is their do-it-all guy. Basically, they're freaking Deebo Samuel in college. Like, how good does KJ Jefferson look? Can he elevate this program? I think 9 wins is about as top as you can get for Arkansas in their current state. They had a really good season last year. I think the stars all aligned, even when going 4-4 in conference. I expect them to take a step back this season.
But they had more wins in 2021 than they had in the previous 3.
So crazy.
So this is a pivotal year for Arkansas as a football program. Are we building on that culture? Going back to a bowl game? Who cares, right? If we win 7 games again, we're setting the bar at 7, and that's a huge improvement. But there's a real world where this thing goes sideways. I think that's probably more realistic than them winning that 9 games. I do like that as a high-end kind of prediction there. But, this is going to be interesting to watch Arkansas. How much goodwill do you get for 7 wins?
What was that?
How much goodwill do you get for 7 wins in Arkansas?
Oh, this guy's a legend there, man. Sam Pittman, they love him, man. I mean, he can do no wrong. I mean, 9 wins out of what they did. Oh, shit, he could go over, I think, for a couple of years. They still be like, yeah, we love him. Let's get it. Let's get into your team, LSU. I am very curious. We've been texting about this stuff. Obviously, Brian Kelly comes over, leaves Notre Dame for this job. I think when everything's rolling, this is the best head coaching job in the country. The most talent. You could throw a rock and hit like 8 5-star kids. It's crazy, man. Like the talent in this area is absurd, and everybody wants to play at LSU. That's the nice thing they have going for them. But they get a transfer quarterback, Jaden Daniels from Arizona State. I like him. They face the 6th toughest schedule. Interesting. 6 returning offensive starters, 5 returning defensive starters. A lot of transfers out. Brian Kelly brought a lot in. This is your team, Tyson. You know them better than me for sure. I want to hear your opinion on where you think LSU is. Where do you think they will be under Brian Kelly?
Well, where they are, I think, this is the beautiful part of, I guess, this season as an LSU fan, but just kind of the broader part in sports where, like, Brian Kelly this year is kind of under no pressure. Like, the line's set at 6.5. If Brian Kelly doesn't go bowling, it'll be a problem in Baton Rouge. But if he wins 8 games, he's on to people will be excited with him. And I think one thing that's going to help, Kayshon Boutte, for my money, is the best receiver in the country. I know he only played 5 games a year ago or whatever it was, and he only played a handful his freshman year. The dude is a monster. Jare Jenkins is a monster. So Jaden Daniels gets to throw. God, the 2 guys getting drafted in the NBA with the same names really mess with my head. But he gets to walk into a position group that I think every other head coach in the SEC might be a little bit envious of at the top end there. Add Noah Cain on offense, transfer from Penn State, who you're pretty familiar with. It's just where this thing is right now is not indicative of where this program is going to go. A, because they won 6 games a year ago, and most of their best players didn't even play. Okay, so that's like where we're at. Derek Stingley doesn't play. Kayshon Boutte doesn't play. Max Johnson won them a couple games, but the dude isn't like an above-average SEC quarterback. Losing him is not going to be huge. Where they're going to go is another discussion, Brad, because if Les Miles and Ed Ogeron could win national championships at LSU, then I'm pretty certain Brian Kelly can follow suit.
I love Brian Kelly. I think he is an awesome coach. And we're going to get a little bit more into a different angle on Kelly in money-making time in regards to the win total. But if Brian Kelly gets this thing rolling at LSU, I think Nick Saban might be cutting that contract short that he just signed, because it's going to be tough to win this conference with Georgia, LSU, and Alabama all rolling. And then if Billy Napier is good at Florida, forget about it. Plus, you got Texas and Oklahoma coming in too. Woo-wee. I mean, we're talking about the fucking the NFC conference in the NFL. I mean, this is going to be all-star teams. It's going to be awesome.
We're going to know about LSU real quick. Florida State week 1, Mississippi State week 3. Those are huge games for Brian Kelly. Those are going to set the tone for how this season's going to go, because when you go through the roster, it doesn't feel like one of those all-time LSU when you're looking at it. Even with the seasons when they win 8 games, it's like, holy shit, these guys are stacked. They lose Damone Clark, right? Ojulari's back, had 7 sacks a year ago. Micah Bakersville is back at the linebacker position. Those guys are going to be playing on Sundays. If they can hold it down, they add a couple transfers from other SEC schools. I think they got 2 corners from Arkansas this offseason. They kind of loaded up with more veterans than they've had in the last couple of years since that 2019 season, which I think was the downfall of a lot of Ed Ogeron's, well, besides bringing your girlfriend and her kid to practice and stuff like that. But I think leadership is going to be huge here in LSU. And this season, for me as a fan, I'm looking for a culture setting year. What are you looking for from LSU?
Culture setting for sure. I mean, I want Brian Kelly to come in. I want him to build this thing up. I expect the quarterback play from Jaden Daniels to be better than it's ever been. People forget Brian Kelly's like an offensive quarterback guru. Like, he is great with quarterbacks, and people are like, "What are you talking about?" Like, look what they did and he did at Notre Dame with the quarterback talent that he had. First of all, it's way harder to get into Notre Dame, even with the football scholarship. And he's taken some mediocre talent and turned Deshaun Kaiser into a legit draft pick for the Browns. They thought he was going to be good. No, Brian Kelly's just like pretty good. So I expect him to come in. I think they're going to win in the short term, and he's going to start building for the long term. I think he's going to get this thing rolling quickly. Yeah,
this is what it feels like to me is this is where Georgia could be if everything goes wrong, is where LSU is right now. There's 2 paths off the national championship win with a team like that. You either end up here with a new head coach after a 6-win season, or you Ohio State, Alabama this thing.
All right, continuing along in our junior varsity JV tier. Here we go. Mississippi State that Tyson was just talking about, big test for LSU. That's a big test for Mike Leach's team too. 7-6 last year. I'm super high on Mississippi State. I'm just going to say that up front. A lot of it has to do with what's coming back. 8th in returning output, 85.4% of their yards are returning, 82 O-line starts, and 75.1% of their tackles are back. We know the second year of a quarterback in Mike Leach's system, they go crazy. They have a huge year. Will Rogers last year threw for 4,700 yards on 73% completions, 36 touchdowns, 9 picks. Another year, I'm not kidding you. This kid might throw for 5,500 yards in this system. I'm super high on Mississippi State. Now, they do play the second toughest schedule in the country. A lot of that has to do with scheduling and who they play on the road and what time. But I think this is a team that can make some noise in the SEC, potentially be somewhat of a dark horse, or at least a spoiler for whoever is riding high and they come in and beat you.
Well, it was the best defense they've had since 2018, a year ago, and they bring back a ton of starters on that side of the ball. They could be realistically even better on defense, but on offense, they bring back like every relevant skill position player, including quarterback. I think they lose Polk and Malik Heath. I think the wide receivers that aren't coming back. Probably should take better notes before we do these. But I think those guys are out.
There's a lot of names, and there's 14 teams.
I think those guys are out. But besides them, like Dylan Johnson, over 5 yards a carry. Jaden Walley, Austin Williams, they could be good wide receivers. But like you said, man, is Will Rogers going to post a vintage, like a OG Mike Leach number 2, second year in the system? We'll see, because the SEC West is still a beast. Don't get it confused just because some of these guys have 6-7 win over-unders. Really, really tough games that they're going to have to play week in and week out. But if you can throw the ball for 300 a pop on everybody, it helps.
Absolutely. Another good name, Tyrus Wheat, linebacker. Yeah. He's going to be sick too. All right, Ole Miss and the transfer portal king, Lane Kiffin. He's been here for 3 seasons now. Man, it feels like time's going quick. Done a great job there, I think. I think he's done an awesome job here in Oxford. Loses his boy, Matt Corral. He gets drafted by the Carolina Panthers. So what does he do? He hits the transfer portal and takes Jackson Dart from USC, since Lincoln Riley brought in his boy, Caleb Williams from Oklahoma with him. Jackson Dart, interesting. I think he flashed at USC last year in spots. At other times looked very immature, making stupid mistakes. And I think there's an overall question of how high his ceiling is. I think he's very talented, 5-star kid coming out of high school. But what is the ceiling on the, like, how good can he actually be? And going from the Pac-12, where you were making mistakes, to the SEC, where the defenses are elite, that's my concern for this Ole Miss team, is going from somebody in Corral who's been there to a question mark in Dart, and bringing in all these other transfers. There's just so much ambiguity around Ole Miss that I'm not quite sure what to expect going into this year.
Well, Jackson Dart to me feels like every Lane Kiffin quarterback a year before we're talking about that Lane Kiffin quarterback as the next guy. Like all those questions you just had, with the exception of the Pac-12 stuff, I think we would sit here and have that conversation about Matt Corral a couple of years ago, right? We would have had you go all the way back in Ole Miss, right? Chad Kelly, guys like that. It just seems to be a institutional thing with these guys. But another transfer they bring in, Zach Evans, former 5-star running back, because this is a team, Brad, that's returning nobody that rushed for over 100 yards in a game, and nobody that caught more than 22 passes a year ago. Ely's gone, Drummond's gone, Corral's gone. So you better be the king of the transfer portal, because the expectations of Ole Miss aren't like – they won 10 games a year ago, and the line set at 7.5. And I promise you, everybody in Mississippi that is an Ole Miss fan wouldn't be pumped with an 8-win season. There just wouldn't be.
10-3 last year too. Really awesome year for him. Here's some stats. I love these if you've been listening to them. They're 118th at returning output. Listen to this number here. 10.8% of their yards are returning. That is last in the country. 10.8. That is insane. So like you said, you got to supplement with transfers. Zach Evans is awesome. How good's Jackson Dart? The good thing is they have 111 O-line starts. So you have a foundation there on the offensive side of the ball. the worrisome thing here, 44.8% of their tackles are returning. It's 116th, even though 7 starters are returning on defense. The people coming back wasn't doing the work. So just a lot of questions surrounding this Ole Miss team. I think Kiffin can do it. It seems like he's comfortable in the setting here where he's bringing in these different transfers and acclimating him to Ole Miss. So we'll see. But 7.5 is an interesting number for a team coming off a 10-3 season.
And realistically, if you look at their early season schedule, they could be 6-2 after 8 weeks, even 5-3 after 8 weeks, and we're looking at that over.
Texas A&M. Talk about questions here. I mean, it's been nothing.
They're in JV. We're going to get heat.
Well, here's why, man. I mean, it's been nothing but disappointing season after disappointing season for Jimbo Fisher since he's taken this job.
Since 2012.
What do you mean?
As a whole.
Yeah, I mean, 34-14 since he's been there. Yeah, but how many big games has this guy played in? How many games have they lost and choked it away? I understand it. Going in your 5th season, he's recruiting well and all this. But on this show, you got to show us. And they have not showed us that they deserve to be in the varsity tier. They beat Alabama like once or twice, and then they go lose to a shitty school. There's just no consistency with this team. And that's why I think you would agree with me, but that's why we put them in this JV tier.
And to me, right, we talked about the defensive lines with everybody. DeMarvin Leal, Michael Clemens, and Tyree Johnson are all gone from A&M. That's 24 of their 39 sacks a year ago. That's a lot between 3 guys to have to replace. And yeah, they killed recruiting. They had like the number 1 recruiting class of all time, according to 24/7 or Rivals or whoever you want to ask. Problem is, those guys aren't going to come in and play and win you a national championship year one. Devin Achane, 7 yards a carry, 9 touchdowns, only got the ball 130 times. Has to get the ball more. I know CJ Spiller was the workhorse there, but it was almost painfully obvious by the end of the year which one of these guys could break a game and which one of them could carry it 20 times for 100 yards, right? Max Johnson or Haynes King is the question.
Well, Jimbo just said Haynes King. He announced it.
Oh, well, that might not be ideal.
And you know Max Johnson well, being the quarterback at LSU. He's not great necessarily, but wow. I was shocked when I saw that.
I mean, it's not early, right? You got to do it. So maybe he's had a really good spring, good summer, and that got him the job. But it's when there's a quarterback competition and Max Johnson's one of the participants. Max Johnson was able to transfer to A&M because his brother's a 5-star tight end. Right? It was one of those, you transfer here, we get your brother, perfect, sign the dotted line, you're in. I don't know if Haynes King's good enough for this team to jump out of JV tier this year. I think, similar to my feelings on USC, it's like this team hasn't won 10 games since 2012, and they've been this talented. Don't tell me this is the most talented A&M team of all time, because every year we hear this is the most talented A&M team they've had in a long time. The corners are sick. The under 200 yards passing the game and above average pass rush, the defense might be good enough to get them to 8-9 wins, but you got to score points, man. Like, you can stop Alabama. That's cool. But you got to score on them too.
124th in returning output. Now, like you said, you bring in all these freshmen, but that's not for the freshmen as a whole. I mean, there can be guys who come in spots and you're like, man, Bryce Young was awesome last year. You know, so-and-so was awesome last year. It's not like you have 7 freshmen on the offense. You're going to win the conference. Like that. That's not how it works in the SEC. It's just too much bully ball in the SEC for that to work. I don't care how good these kids are coming out of high school. They're going to have to show me that they can actually go and have a consistent season. 8-4 last year. Was anybody happy with an 8-4 record from Texas A&M last year? No, it's disappointing. Their win total once again set at 8.5. I think, me personally, once again, it's either going to be an 8 or 9 win season, so they're going to go over or under by half game. That's what they do. They're disappointing. Haynes King, QB, or Max Johnson. I mean, both below average, I think, for what we are expecting from a talented A&M team. I mean, they are what they are. They're just perennial disappointments.
There's a chance Spencer Rattler wins the starting job at Texas A&M if he's there. And 100%. We just shitted on that guy.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
All right, let's get into the varsity tier. Let's talk about the big boys. And there's only one in here as well, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide. And obviously with good reason, man. This is their conference. This is their division. They dominate this shit. 2021, lost in the title game to Georgia, won the SEC title game, beating Georgia, went 13-2. Bryce Young's back, 4,800 yards last year, 66.9% completion percentage, 47 touchdowns and 7 picks. Only good enough just to win the Heisman Trophy, first time ever an Alabama quarterback has won. I think the questions are about the wide receivers. I think that's the big question here. There's no big names that we kind of followed. And like, oh, he's waiting in the wings, waiting to kind of step up. And Nick Saban said it. They had an opportunity, these guys, to step up in the national championship game. They didn't, so hit the transfer portal. Got a guy from Louisville, who I think will be good for him. But yeah, I think the star of this offense, besides Bryce Young, is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs, the transfer running back from Georgia Tech.
The dude is fantastic. He is fantastic. He is when you watched him at Georgia Tech, it was painful. It was like, this dude shouldn't be even, this is like watching somebody play literally varsity. It's like JV. I mean, he's a dual threat, right? I mean, this guy, he's a big time receiving threat out of the backfield. And Alabama, Najee Harris was a really good wide receiver out of the backfield, but Jahmyr Gibbs can run routes and stuff like this at 20 years old, which is pretty insane, and it's something that I think is going to pair really well. And sorry to cut you off on your Alabama point here, but you didn't even mention the best player in the country, Will Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who won the Heisman Trophy isn't even the alpha on his college football team as far as being the best player. This is a dude in a stacked quarterback class, right, that we were talking about last week. At least it looks that way now. That is still projected to go number one in every single mock draft that you look at, because if he came out last year as a sophomore, he would have went number one. And if he came out as a freshman, he might have went top in the first round, top 25. This dude is special. He's the best edge rusher I think Nick Saban's ever had at Alabama.
And I'm going to add, we don't do this a lot, but it's more so here. But these are the preseason All-Americans, at least on the watch list, according to Phil Steele, who does this. Bryce Young, obviously, Will Anderson, who you mentioned. Eli Ricks, first team preseason, first team. Jordan Battle, safety, first team. Linebacker Henry Toa, second team. Wide receiver Jermaine Burton, third team. Offensive guard Emil Ecklior, third team. And then tight end Cameron Latu, awesome, fourth team. That's so many guys.
That's half the team.
It's crazy. Just the talent here. First team, second. Like these, it's just a churn and burn of talent that comes through this program. So, yeah, you can have your questions about who's going to step up for receiver. And I think that's probably the only weakness I see is wide receiver. Quarterback's excellent. Running back, excellent. Entire defense, they're going to be better than they were last year. How good is this receiver group going to be? Does that potentially hinder or reduce what Bryce Young's output was last year, not having those elite guys that he had the previous season? We'll see. I trust Alabama to have the talent, the recruiting to all of a sudden have these guys we've never heard of pop, boom. These aren't next guys that we know at Bama.
It was a rebuild year last year.
Which is crazy.
They would have maybe won the national championship if Jameson Williams didn't tear his ACL. Like, this is insane. This is insane. Because last year was, to me, one of the weaker Alabama teams of the last 10 years. Like, looking at them, they didn't match up with the Mac Jones teams or even the Tua teams. But they're back and they're better. And they played they won the SEC and they played in a national championship game. This is insane.
Okay. That is the first part. That's our football breakdown. We have our second half breakdown, which is money making time as we go through everything here. Each team win totals. But first, like we always do, and I can't believe this. And I buried the lead. Alabama is a minus 140 favorite to win this conference, by the way. Win total 11.5, which we'll get to, but minus 140 to win this conference. Let's just go ahead and jump right in to money making time here and start out with our conference winner here. Tyson, lead this thing off. Who do you have winning this conference?
Bama, minus 140, minus 440, minus 840. Alabama is the best team in the SEC. Georgia is a damn good second best team in the conference. I think if you went across every other conference in the country, Georgia would have a shot at winning those ones. But Alabama is it's different this year. It just feels different. I mean, there are question marks they have to answer, but I've seen Nick Saban answer bigger questions than this.
I'm with you, man. It's Bama. It's always going to be Bama. It was always Bama this year. Bryce Young's back. The defense is going to be sick. They have a chip on their shoulder.
So I don't want to hear it from anybody about this is what we said last season. No, it's not.
No, we were on Georgia. Yeah, absolutely. Preseason, we said they're going to win the national championship. They're going to win the SEC. The defense was awesome. This defense is going to be awesome for the Crimson Tide this year. Defense wins championships. That's what it does at Alabama. Their offense is going to be good enough. I don't care. They're going to be good enough. Probably going to be great. They're going to win this conference, and I think going to set up an insane showdown between Bama and Ohio State, which might be one for the ages. Be one for the ages. Woo. Okay. Let's go through it here. Win total wise, we're going to start out in the East, go alphabetically. Let's go to Florida. Win total is set at 7, over -130, under +110. Tyson, do you have a pick on the Florida Gators?
I think Florida's going to win 8 games. So I'm going over. I hate the line at 7. And for a lot of the reasons that we said not to like Florida, I still think are true. But that offense flashed at times last season in a way that I don't think we've seen a Florida offense flash. And hopefully, we can unhitch the carriage now. We got, we have a little bit of juice back in the building, and it's still Florida. So when you give me these teams with these pedigrees and these lines are so low, I think a couple of the bottom tier teams in the SEC got better, but I don't think they got good enough to beat guys like Florida.
I'm going over 7 as well. Yeah, I like this Florida team a lot. A lot of it has to do with my love for Billy Napier. I think he's awesome. But you're setting it at 7. They went 6-7 last year, 2-6 in conference with a mess. I think quarterback play is going to be better with Richardson. I expect him to be healthy. I expect him to be good. And I think that's good enough to get 7 wins. And I agree with you, Tyson. I think they're going to win around 8 games. Not quite there yet, but I think 8 games is good enough. We get that cash and cash our ticket. Next team on the board, Georgia. If you're interested in playing their conference, they're +160. Tyson, I like Bama. That's what you said. Here's you go. Win total 10.5. Over is -280 on the juice. Under is +210. Can I interest you in any angle to play Georgia here?
I wish I could take the under. I really wish I could, because +210 for 10, like 10 wins, 10-3 would be what Georgia would have to go. And it's not impossible to talk yourself into this being a 10-3 football team, because a 10-3 football team is damn good. But I'm not touching it because I saw what they did a year ago. I believe in the recruiting that Kirby Smart has had. And we'll see some guys this year that jump up that all of a sudden are first-round draft picks, either this year, next year, or the year after that. But to me, like, this team could win the national championship game again, or they could win 9 games. And I don't know which one.
Yeah, I don't have the balls to touch the under here. It's so juicy, and it's like, oh, my God, man. You just kind of roll the dice on it, but I don't want to do that. I think Georgia's going to be awesome. 11 wins, I can definitely see that, especially if they just go to the SEC championship game. I don't have the balls to take anything with Georgia. Kentucky, win total 7.5, over -125, under +105. Are you taking anything with the Kentucky Wildcats?
I would lean on. Well, no, I'm not. I'll start there. I don't know if you're going to, but like, for all the reasons we mentioned about Will Levis, and if he is that good, he'll take this team, to the over fairly comfortably if he's as good as people say. But they just lost so much on offense that it's almost unfair, because they're going to be playing good defenses week over week. And I think Will Levis this season's in line to get a lot of hate. And I don't know if all of it's going to be his fault.
I'm not taking anything either. I don't like that number at 7.5. I think if it was 8, if they gave us a flat number, I'd probably play the under and say worst case scenario, I push, right? 7.5, I think, a 3-game regression. And yes, they lost a lot, but Mark Stoops has done a great job there. I don't think enough of the other teams here have gotten markedly better where I think they can push it down. Like, I do think, like we discussed, South Carolina and Tennessee are going to be better, but I think Missouri is going to be worse. Vanderbilt's still out there. Florida's going to be better, but that's going to be a tough game. So I'm not going to take anything here on Kentucky.
The winner of the Kentucky-Florida game hits their over.
Yes, I agree with that. That's good something to keep in mind there. Let's go to Missouri. Win total 5.5, over +120, under minus 140. Are you interested in anything with Missouri?
Did you say 5.5?
5.5.
For some reason, I thought it was 4.5, and I wasn't going to touch them. Missouri's not going to a bowl. I'm taking the under. Missouri, like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, isn't that a little crazy?
It feels very respectful to the Missouri Tigers, who, by the way, are the worst Tigers in a conference that's just full of them. Too many Tigers in the SEC, Brad.
Too many. I love Eli Drinkwitz. They're not going bowling this year. Under 5.5 as well. They just lost too much. Too many questions. Brady Cook. I don't know. I think this is going to be a worse team, and honestly, there's a chance they might lose to Vandy, which would be nuts.
Would it be that nuts? Like, if they lined up today, what would those odds be?
Missouri touchdown, maybe by a touchdown.
Like plus 210, or like it wouldn't be crazy.
No, I guess you're right. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be App State over Michigan, but man, Vandy's been so bad. All right, South Carolina win total 6.5, overs plus 115, under is minus 120. You doing anything here?
I'm not for the same reason I didn't touch Oklahoma a year ago. I don't trust Spencer Rattler to be what I expect of him. Whether that, if I think he's going to be horrible, there's a chance he's average, and if I think he's going to be average, he's probably going to be horrible. And he's got to be average for South Carolina to hit the over. And I think there's a better chance that he's not. But again, anything's better than what they had a year ago. They had offensive linemen that were just like showing up to social studies, like history 101. They're like, "Hey, you want to play?" Like that's where we were at in South Carolina a year ago.
Due to that, I'm taking over 6.5. I think Rattler's going to play better. I like Shane Beamer a lot. All they have to do is do what they did last year. They went 3-5 in conference, 7-6 overall. They get a lot returning back. Their quarterback play is enhanced. I'm going to take over 6.5, especially with that plus 115 price. Get a little value there. Get a little plus money action. I will roll the dice on a team to stay at the level they were last year. I think I know where you're going with this, but Tennessee win total 7.5. Over is minus 190. Under plus 145. Anything you're doing there?
I'm taking the over on Tennessee. I'm going to hold a Hendon Hooker ticket at plus 6,000 to win the Heisman. I'm thinking about holding the long shot Tennessee ticket for the conference at plus 5,000 because I think that they have as good a chance as any of the others to surprise people. But one thing that I am intrigued by, Brad, is they're plus 450 to win 10 games. 10 games feels like the absolute ceiling for me for Tennessee, but I could see that happening. I think that Hendon Hooker is a really good player. And I think that Tennessee is going to score a lot of points. And Tennessee came in 26th in the media poll and I think 27th in the coaches poll before the season starts here. So there's some love out there from, especially the coaches poll preseason. It's kind of tough to see like what these guys are voting for their own teams, but there's respect for Tennessee from everybody else in the country. And I think it's time the betting market gave him some respect too.
I'm with you on the over 7.5. I think Hendon Hooker's awesome. Second year under Josh Heupel. Jeez, Josh Heupel's offense. That will help him out. It's going to help everybody out on the skill position level. Cedric Tillman's awesome. 91 offensive line starts. That is a foundation there. 13th returning output on both sides of the ball. This is a strong football team. 8 wins. I think, hell, even that's a little disappointing for how good this team is. I'm with you, man. That is 10 wins. That is juicy to take that. I may be interested in holding that with you. I'm not going to lie, Tyson.
Shoot, for plus 450, we could do a lot worse. Like the teams that are around on that number, like Coastal Carolina's plus 350, but they got the same odds to win 10 games as they have 100 points better than Washington to win 10 games. So that's kind of the tier that we're sitting in there. And I think hell freezes over before Washington football team wins 10 games this season.
Good pick there. All right, I'm marking it down with you. You on that? Tennessee win 10 games, hold a ticket? Let's fucking do it. Let's do it. Now, this one's going to be interesting. We can't talk too much about it because Vanderbilt started off 1-0. But maybe we can just give a little thought process into how to bet Vanderbilt this year. Win totals at 2.5, or was at 2.5 pre-flop. Over plus 100, under minus 120. We were talking before the show. I released it out on our social media page, my picks for week 0. I loved Vandy going into Hawaii and winning this game. They have SEC guys. There's a mutiny in Hawaii. Blah blah blah. What are you targeting on Vandy this year? Are you waiting for the conference to bet against them? Are you targeting them out of conference, maybe playing them with this experience?
Well, one thing that I'm interested in for Vanderbilt this season is what are the lines going to be in some of these big games? Because one thing that I know about Vanderbilt football is they're going to be plus 30 in some of these SEC games, and they're going to backdoor cover because that's what happens. That's what Vanderbilt does, man. They lose, they get the shit kicked out of them for 3.5 quarters, and they score a touchdown to cut it to 28. And that's one thing that I think you can look for. But as far as like out of conference stuff, I don't know if they beat Northern Illinois, but that's one that I think that's like the last real opportunity you have to probably get them against a team of similar. I don't even want to say pedigree because Northern Illinois has actually been better than Vanderbilt, but a team of similar talent level maybe from the Vandy team we just saw. Which, by the way, who knows how good Hawaii is, like what that meant. But if you bet them at 2.5, you're feeling good.
Right, absolutely. All right, let's keep on chugging. We got Alabama in the West. Win total 11.5. Jesus. Over plus 125, under minus 140. You were basically betting on Alabama to win the regular season and win the SEC championship game to cash this bet. So perfect season for Bama before they get into the college football playoff. Anything you're doing here on Alabama besides us playing their conference future?
I can't. I want to, but I can't. This line makes it impossible. This is, there's very few times where I look at a betting line and I'm like, that's unfair. But this, like, how do you play this line? Unless you're so convicted that they're either going to go undefeated or you're like, this team is so overrated, they're going to lose at least one game. Like, that's where we're at. If you think they're going to drop one to an upstart LSU team or something in November, then play them under. Otherwise, like, just play a national championship ticket. That's essentially what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. A national championship. I think there's still plus 260, I believe, unless that's changed here on FanDuel. Let me take a peek real quick. Plus 180 now. So, better. Ultimately, it's still better value than plus 125. Like you're still getting better juice. That's what you're betting. I'm with you. I'm not taking anything here. It's just you're walking way too razor thin of a line here to try to cash this ticket. SEC is getting more talented. I love Alabama as much as the next guy talent-wise and how good I think they're going to be this year, but this is way too thin of a line to be playing something on a win total.
And college football is too weird.
Yeah. You're talking about kids who are 18 and their girlfriend dumped them before the game. Like, you don't know how these guys are going to play. Arkansas, win total 7, over minus 115, under minus 105. So it seems like a perfect line set there. Last year went 9-4, so you're looking at a 2-game regression. Are you interested in anything Razorbacks?
No, and I feel bad going through this, but I don't have that many bets for the SEC for a lot of these middle tier teams. Like we laid out, Arkansas, like you said, high end, they could win 9 games. Low end, they could probably win 4. And that's just way too big of a variance for me to preseason walk into it. I'd rather play them week to week.
Yep, same with me. I think 7's right. And we discussed this a little bit. Sometimes the flat number is a blessing for your win total because you're like, listen, worst case you push. If you're kind of reaching above, here it's like, man, if it's 7 and I want to play the under, you're probably should be right, but you're not getting the hook on it because the book knows they're probably going to win 7. It feels like it's like this is a 7-1 football team. We're just going to give you 7 and not juice it either way, basically. So I'm not interested in that. So I can't play anything here preseason as well. Auburn's win total, another flat 6, minus 120 juice to the over. Under is minus 105. Are you going to play anything here with Auburn?
I'm going under on Auburn. I don't think Auburn's going to make a bowl game. I don't think this Auburn – I think, running the football, this Auburn team is going to be special. But I don't think game script-wise they're going to have a chance to run the ball the way they want to because the defense isn't great. The passing game isn't great. And we're still kind of dealing with a lot of the fallout of a year ago. To me, this one was easy at plus money. I'm interested to see where you're at.
I am with you under 6. Same reasons you pointed out. I mean, they have a toughest schedule. The players transferred out and it seems bad. Yeah, maybe there's some buy-in for the players who stayed and they're committed to it. That doesn't mean that they're still the most talented players in that program, right? I mean, Tank Bigsby's awesome, and we went through that when we broke it down football wise. Derek Hall, but not a lot of returning output. They play a tough schedule. I don't think TJ Finley's good at all at quarterback, and I think that's going to cost him a lot in these games in the SEC. I'm going under 6. Let's get to your boys. LSU, led by Brian Kelly, win total at 6.5. Overs -140. Under is +120. Were you doing anything here, Tyson?
If I explain this to everybody, I'm going to sound like a homer. So I'm going to let you do it and let everyone know we're in lockstep here.
Okay. Well, I tease this a little bit, and this is a Brian Kelly angle. I'm going over 6.5. I'll say that to start here. Brian Kelly's never not gone over his win total number. Maybe he pushes when he was at Notre Dame. He's either exceeded it or was right at it when he was at Notre Dame. That is incredible. Dude constantly outperforms the Vegas expectations for this football team does. That's what a great coach does. Now he's coming into LSU. I don't care at 6.5. This is LSU, for Christ's sake. 6 and 7 was an anomaly, and you're going to set it at 6.5 on this line. There's so much talent in this program. Now you're giving a great coach all this talent, and Brian Kelly and a quarterback, Jaden Daniels, who I think is good. This is an 8-win football team to me. I think they go way over this. I think this is my favorite bet besides Alabama to win the conference. This is my favorite win total bet for sure. LSU over 6.5.
Third most winning coach in college football behind Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney by percentage of wins versus games played, right? When wins or loss, he's the third best in the country. And he's walking into a situation with more probably raw athletic talent than he's had at any stop in his career. There were some Notre Dame teams that were really good, but they didn't. These LSU boys are freaks year in and year out. We've never seen – like Kyron Williams is cool, but Kyron Williams ran like a 4.75 40. Right, and that's like the athletes that he was working with a year ago that were able to beat guys out. I think Brian Kelly might be able to find some things here early on in the season that helps them get to this over number. And I'm with you, man. Brian Kelly can't win 6 games. It's just like when does that happen? What are we talking about?
I don't know.
He'd be in the NFL, right? He could roll into the NFL, and if his line's at 2 games, Brian Kelly's going to win 3.
Yeah,
like, good coach.
I know. I love this bet. Okay, Mississippi State. This one's interesting. Win total of 6.5, over -160, under +135. I went through all the returning thing. I'm not going to do it again. I'm just going to jump right into it real quick because I think you may differ with me here. But I'm going to go over 6.5 for Mississippi State. I know the schedule's going to be tough that they face, but I'm expecting huge things out of Will Rogers. And I think Mike Leach is finally going to get his guys in at Mississippi State who are going to perform above expectations. I'm going over 6.5. Are you doing anything here with Mississippi State?
I'm not, because to me, this feels like a 7-win football team. And that number is pretty razor thin. And I know everything we talked about, everybody's returning. This is awesome. And it's a Mike Leach-led offense, and it's going to be sweet. But Mike Leach-led offenses in the SEC haven't mixed all that well. And I think this might be the best one that he's had in a minute here, had really in a minute in his college football tenure, at least quarterback-wise. I think we're going to see some special stuff, but you got to stop somebody.
Ole Miss, 7.5 is the number, over -130, under +120. Went 10-3 last year, so to go under is a 3-game regression. Are you playing anything on the Ole Miss Rebels?
No, and I'll tell you exactly how Ole Miss's season is going to go, because this is exactly how all Ole Miss seasons goes. You can go back to when Hugh Freeze, Ed Orgeron, whoever you want. They're going to start out 6-2. They're going to peak in the top 10 of the rankings, and then they're going to finish the season with 7 or 8 wins. And that's how this season's going to go for Ole Miss. They have a pretty manageable opening of the season schedule-wise, and then it's a buzzsaw. And they're not good enough to beat a lot of these teams in the SEC. They're a little soft still, Brad. I know Joey Freshwater's your guy, and we love Lane Kiffin on this podcast, but Lane Kiffin, to me, has had a lot more talent than this and has exceeded expectations with that. But when Lane Kiffin doesn't have great talent on his rosters, Lane Kiffin's adjustments and things like that at halftime aren't always enough to put a team over the edge. And the SEC is gaining better coaches year over year. And almost, I don't mean to disrespect Lane Kiffin, but kind of keeping him in the same spot where the forward trajectory and stuff, where he can break into that upper echelon of coaches, is kind of null right now, right? Like, he's not a better coach than Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher, Brian Kelly, Kirby Smart. You run down the list. Is he better than Stoops? I don't know. And I don't think this is, nearly as good of a roster he's had at Ole Miss. I'm not touching it because, again, they could score enough points to win a lot of games. But everything's new, man.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not touching it. Too many question marks when we went through it football-wise. There's too many question marks with the quarterback dart. I don't know how he's going to play. So many transfers coming in. I don't think you can play this, especially at a minus 130 price. If it was flipped and it was plus 120 on the over, maybe, because there's some value there. I won't want to lay any juice on this for a team I have no clue what to expect. Now, to close it out here, another team you really don't know, Texas A&M. Win total 8.5, over minus 145, under plus 140. Tyson, can I interest you in anything here?
No, this is an absolutely ridiculous conference. When you look at these lines, like, the national media have you believe A&M's line should be 10.5, 11 wins. Like, that's where this team should be because of Jimbo and Saban were beefing this offseason and bringing all these recruits and all these transfers and everything. Haven't won 10 games since 2012. Jimbo Fisher gets a pass year over year for underperforming, and he's had one for a while. And I'm getting sick of it, man. And I think if this team hits the over, if they win 9 games, I'm still disappointed. Like, to me, this 8.5, like, this is a joke, and I don't even know which way to go. Like, this team should be a 10-win team, 11-win team on talent. Jimbo Fisher has to win a big game, and he's gotten embarrassed more times than not. And maybe not even like a big nighttime game, but when it's 11 a.m. kickoff on CBS and you turn it on and they're in a dogfight with Arkansas, it's not a good look, brother.
Well, out of spite, I'm going under 8.5. You give me plus 140. They constantly underperform. They went 8-4 last year. Their quarterback situation, it might be worse than it was last year.
Yeah.
They have like no returning starters or returning output. They're going to rely on these 5-star kids. And I think the SEC talent is raised. Florida's better. Mississippi State's going to be better.
Some of these guys are 22 years old, man, and we're talking about 5-star recruits that are 18 and they were awesome in high school. We're talking about 22-year-old 5-star recruits. Brian Robinson was a 5-star recruit and had to let Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris and all these other guys play in front of him, and he was 23 by the time he got a crack at SEC football. And all he did was run over a bunch of 18-year-olds. In that movie, the ending doesn't change based on the jersey.
Because we've seen it all the time. We're talking about SEC football. Like, it's not an anomaly here. There's data for this stuff. You need grown men to win in this sport, and especially in this conference. And that's why Georgia's been doing it. That's why Alabama has been doing it for so long. Florida used to do it all the time back in the day. There's a recipe for it, and the fact that A&M continually thinks that, hey, let's just go have great recruiting classes, and then everything falls apart on them. You wonder why. So under 8.5, I don't give a shit. Plus 140, give me it. I think they underperform. We're talking about a program that constantly does that. And expectations are high again. Woo! And they're going to underperform again, and we're going to cash that bet.
Here's one of my favorite bets in the SEC, and we don't know a line. I don't care a line. Alabama is going to donkey Texas A&M this year. And Jimbo Fisher is going to keep his mouth shut at every SEC media day for the next decade.
I wish I could. Oh, man.
Look, Saban started the fight. Sometimes you're allowed to. Like, it's the Bruce Lee thing, man. You dress however you want when you kick everybody's ass. Nick Saban can say whatever he wants to these people.
All right, I'm looking online here to see if we can get an early look ahead, Tyson. What do you know when that game is?
LSU and Bama always play November 5th. Let's see.
I'm scrolling right now. It's bad. This bad live air, but November 26th is LSU. Oh, shoot. I've gone too far.
I found, what are the odds? Bama minus 16 on May
16?
31st. On May 31st, so that line's probably changed. But look, man, my two favorite bets of the year. Alabama beat somebody that we think is going to be good by 30 in week 1. They did it to Miami last year, and we were on here giving you free handouts, free money. And then whoever pissed Nick Saban off the most, Bama also beats them by 30. And most of the time that was Les Miles. So I'm pretty familiar with this.
I love that too. I think Bama's going to stomp out opponents this year. That's why we haven't won in our SEC. That's why we haven't won in the SEC conference as our big pick. That's going to do it for our SEC conference previews and picks episode. We did the other 4 Power 5 conferences. If you haven't seen them, go check them out. They're up on our YouTube. They're up on Apple Podcasts, and they're up on Spotify. In the meantime, follow us on Instagram at _ the roundtable pod _ Same with TikTok at _ the roundtable pod _ and Twitter at TRT _ pod. Last week, or whenever you're watching this, was week 0. I gave out picks for it. Tyson and I are going to be doing some fun stuff this year with college football. So definitely make sure to follow us there. And if you're an NFL fan, watch our breakdowns as well, as we're about to finish up each division breakdown. Then we're going to give out our gambling picks for the NFL football as well. So we got a lot coming at you.
Yeah, and I brought up Brian Robinson's name. Well wishes to him after today. What a shit show.
Yeah, what a sad, crazy story. So yeah, hopefully he gets better soon. Well, that's going to do it for us. As always, we appreciate you all listening. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. We really appreciate the support. Until we talk next time, peace.